Why do I feel like I'm playing a Mario game?
Braid is a game that is so much like Super Mario Bros. That at first I thought the developers had hacked the ROM and added their own graphics. However, Braid is much more than a basic platformer. Like Limbo, it's a puzzle game, but it's obvious that it's more of a puzzle game than anything else. You have the ability to manipulate time. Well, you're only able to move it backwards. Reason being, going backwards in time is central to the plot, but I'll get into that later.
I actually regret doing Indie Month in the way that I did.
In all out honesty, I only planned 3 games and was going to wing it for the next 2. I had planned Shank for the first and Dust and a Listening Tale being the second, and then following with a really bad indie game, but then decided not to do the third one out of reasons for which I will not explain. So I did Limbo, Puddle, and now Braid. I wish I had saved Shank and Dust for the end, as they were the better games. Some people suggested Minecraft, but I just don't like that game. I can see the appeal to it as it's a creativity toy like Legos, so much like Legos that the people who make Lego actually made a Lego Minecraft. That's something what I like to call the Zynga loop.
The Zynga loop is when someone makes a virtual version of something that already exists in the real world. Then it becomes so popular that they make a real world version of it. You know, like Words with Friends became really popular and they made an actual board game of it. I'm sorry, but don't we have something already called Scrabble?
But if I were to build something, I'd rather do it in the real world rather than a virtual one. Then I could show it off to people who come over and say, hell yeah, I built that with my own hands, and keep yours off of it. But enough filler. I'm just trying to increase the length of this review because I'm hoping that I can at least pass 3 minutes this time. It's just that Braid is really short. I mean, really short. I cleared all the levels in about 45 minutes, but I did take extra time to solve the puzzles just so I can get all the puzzle pieces.
I'm going to have to say that even with my ridiculously high standards of what art is, Braid comes pretty close to it.
I really like what they did with the art. Everything looks like a painting to the point where you can see the brush strokes and everything. Although the character Tim, the one that you play as, looks rather out of place. He looks cel-shaded compared to the painted world, and the monsters contrast a bit too, but not as much as Tim does. The music is very pretty. It's calming to say the least, but I never really paid that much attention to it as it's pretty quiet. It reminds me of wind chimes for some odd reason. Like you hear it, but you really don't notice it.
Although I'll have to admit that I was playing the overworld music from Super Mario Bros. In my head when I was playing this game.
One part of the gameplay is exactly like the Mario games. You head to the right and jump on enemies as you make your way through the stage. One thing that does bother me is that the enemies seem a little too much like Mario enemies. The little brown things look a little too much like Goombas, and the green crab claw that comes out of a pipe are too much like piranha plants. But that's only a minor factor in gameplay. The major part is solving puzzles by rewinding time. And the rewinding of time is a central theme to the game as it's part of the story, and I'll get into that in a bit. A lot of these puzzles take a lot of thinking to solve, because to unlock the final level, you need to get all the puzzle pieces, and some of these just seem impossible to figure out. And some of the puzzles are not obvious. It's like solving a Rubik's Cube or one of those Chinese puzzle boxes, requiring a lot of precise manipulations of time and character placement.
99% of the time, I do not use strategy guides when doing my reviews. The reason being, I want to go in with no prior knowledge of the game when I go to play it. So this way I can formulate a clear and unbiased opinion. However, there are those times when I have to, and Braid is just one of those games that I had to use a strategy guide for.
Yes, some of Braid's puzzles are just that difficult. I've come across puzzles that had me asking myself, why didn't I think of that after I looked them up, or just had me sitting there in jaw-dropping disbelief at how complex the puzzle was. While Limbo had very lame, no-brainer puzzles, Braid is the opposite. These are puzzles that make you think and put effort into solving them.
Now earlier I said that time manipulation plays a huge factor in the game, so we're going back to the past to go back to the future. Or are we going back to the past to go back to the present? Or are we going back to the past to correct the future, to fix the present, so we can go back?
The story is explained by books before the beginning of each level. However, I'm not sure if the story is told in order of the levels that you go in, and the fact that level 1 is the last level kinda makes you wonder. Tim is trying to correct a big mistake he made with the princess. It's implied that he said something to upset her, but there's also a monster mentioned, and the ending hints that Tim is actually the monster the princess is running away from. It's purposely left ambiguous so that the player can interpret the story in any way that they want. I like to think that he told the princess to lay out the cake and she thinks he's a monster because she's just too high maintenance.
Well, I like Braid. Not enough to give it an amazing high score, but enough to say that it's a very good game. Old school platforming with time manipulation mechanics? No one should miss out on that!